Hello students. After the unit 4, now I am going to explain unit 5, that is auditing of limited companies and others. So here we are going to discuss more about law related aspects of auditing. Usually I had already discussed this in the introductory part of auditing. For a sole trading concern, auditing is not mandatory. Even for a partnership firm, auditing is not mandatory. However, if the partnership deed has provided for the audit of accounts, then they have to go for auditing. So Indian Partnership Act 1932 has not given any compulsion to go for auditing, but only when the partners decide and if they have mentioned that in the partnership deed, then they have to go for auditing. Next, when it comes to limited companies or when it comes to joint stock companies, they have to be audited. It is mandatory because they are registered under Indian Companies Act 1956, and after the amendment of Companies Act 2013, it has made mandatory that every joint stock company, whether it is a limited liability or public sector or private sector, every company which has registered under this act has to go for auditing, and it is mandatory, and it has to be reported to the shareholders at the annual general meeting at the every year end. When it comes to the meaning of company auditor, who is a company auditor? So Indian Companies Act has decided or has given the definition for the company auditor, and it is according to the provisions of section 141 subsection 1 of the Companies Act 2013. A person shall be eligible for appointment as an auditor of a company only if he is a chartered accountant within the meaning of Chartered Accountants Act 1949 and holds a valid certificate of practice. So those identified chartered accountants from the professional body will be eligible to become the company auditor. When it comes to the legal status or position of the auditor, so the auditor is an agent of the shareholder. So he acts as a linkage between the shareholder and the company. So the word that is given by the auditor to the shareholders matters the most, because ultimately the shareholders would have elected him in the annual general meeting. So he becomes an agent between the company and the shareholders. Then an officer of the company. So whenever an auditor is appointed, he is an officer of that particular company or that particular client, and he is not any of the director or employee of the company. He just becomes the officer of the company. He takes hold the position for the auditing tenure, and he is going to complete his job of auditing. And he is also called as a servant of the company, because ultimately his job is to serve for the purpose of getting a clear picture about the company and its affairs to the shareholders. So he is the servant of the company. He is going to help the company also in the assessment process. So therefore he is also called as servant of the company. Appointment of auditor. So in terms of section 139 subsection 1 of the Companies Act 2013, every auditor has to be appointed, and they have got certain terms and conditions for the appointment. So we have appointment for first auditor, that is when a company is going to go for auditing for the first time. The auditor whomsoever comes and verifies the books of accounts, he is the first auditor. And later on, if they go for the subsequent auditing, then if they are going to appoint the other auditors, then they are called as other auditor. So again, for the first auditor, if it is a government company, the rules would be different. If it is other companies, the rules would be different. And similarly for subsequent auditors as well. So when it comes for the appointment of first auditor, suppose if it is a government company, it has to be as per the rules provided by CAG. This I have given you the full form when I did the previous chapters. Comptroller and Audit General of India within 60 days of registration of company. Suppose if they have failed to appoint, then the board of directors of that particular company can appoint it by the next 30 days. And suppose if the board of directors also fail in appointing the auditor, then they can appoint in the next, the company can appoint in the next 60 days by having extraordinary general meeting, and they would be holding the position at the conclusion of first annual general meeting. And suppose if in case any other company apart from government company, then they have to be appointed by board of directors within 30 days of registration of company. Suppose if they have failed, then again they can be appointed within 90 days at EGM. And by the end of the first annual general meeting, they should be holding that particular office. Rules regarding appointment of other auditor, that is subsequent auditors. Here this appointment is going to be with regards to rotation, or it can be reappointment, or it can also be filling the casual vacancy, because the first auditor, after first auditor, whomsoever is going to come, he can be subjected to job rotation. He can also be subjected for reappointment, that is first auditor can also be reappointed as a subsequent auditor, or it can be in a situation where you have to fill the casual vacancy. So in such situations, if it is a government company, the auditor will be appointed by CAG. Please remember, every government company with regards to auditing, they are connected with CAG, and it has to be the auditor has to be appointed within 180 days from the commencement of financial year, and he should be holding the position till that particular conclusion of annual general meeting. And if it is other than government company, then of course they can be appointed by see, every other company at the first annual general meeting appoint an individual, so he will be holding the position at the conclusion of annual general meeting. So he can hold the position till 6th annual general meeting, and thereafter till the conclusion of 6th annual general meeting. And even if the auditor is appointed for 5 years, then also members of the company should ratify such appointment. So usually the tenure for the auditor, if he is going to be there with the company, it has a tenure, and that tenure would be 5 years, and at the end of the 6th year also he will continue, but it cannot be extended beyond. The manner and procedure of appointing is being prescribed by Comptroller and Audit General of India, and they have to get written consent of the auditor. So only after the a consent from the auditor, then they can appoint, and then they can provide the particular contract. And notice of appointment should be filled with the registrar within 15 days of the meeting in which the auditor is appointed. So auditor should give his consent. After getting consent, he has to go, the company has to fill that with the registrar of company within 15 days of the meeting. Some of the other provisions regarding reappointment and casual vacancy of an auditor would be: a retiring auditor may be reappointed at an annual general meeting if he is not disqualified for reappointment. So which means he has to be a qualified person, and he has to be agreed by every stakeholder, and only then he can be taken for consideration. He has not given the company a notice in writing of his unwillingness to be reappointed. So which means he has to give the consent that he is interested to continue again with the same client. A special resolution has not been passed, so which means there should not be any other new auditor in the picture when this particular decision is being considered by the members of the company and the stakeholders. Where at an AGM no auditor is appointed or reappointed, the existing auditor shall continue to be the auditor of the company. So at the end of every annual general meeting, the stakeholders and the shareholders would elect the auditor. And suppose if they have not elected any new auditor, the existing auditor continues to provide his services to the client. And this, continuation can be only for one term of 5 consecutive years if it is an individual. And if it is a company, they cannot have more than two terms, that is 5 consecutive years. Say for example, a company has completed 10 years with a particular client, but he cannot again go and ask for reappointment for the next 5 years. So if he is an individual, it would be only for one term, that is for 5 years. If it is a company, then they will be eligible for two consecutive terms, that is for up to 10 years. And after 10 years they cannot continue their services with the same client, because in order to reduce more of rapport between the client and the auditor, if they get more comfort zone, they might have more chances of fraudulent activities. So that's the reason they have got this restriction on the tenure. If it is an individual, it is 5 years. If it is a company, it is maximum 10 years. In case of casual vacancies to be filled, and if it is a government company, so again comptroller and audit general can appoint within 30 days. And suppose if they have failed to do within stipulated 30 days, again they can take 30 more days and they have to fill the vacancy. They cannot ask board of directors to do this. Only the CAG can do this particular appointment of the casual vacancy. Suppose if it is any other company apart from government company, then they have to get the nod from the board of directors. In case of resignation by the auditor, usually the resignation will be done at the conclusion of annual general meeting. Remuneration of auditors is done as per section 142 of Companies Act, and usually it is fixed at a general meeting, right? And usually it is determined by the shareholders in consensus, and provided that the board may fix the remuneration of the first auditor appointed by it. The remuneration under subsection 1 shall, in addition to the fee payable to an auditor, it includes any other expenses that would have been incurred in addition with the auditing procedure by the auditor. So but it does not include any remuneration paid to him for any other service rendered by him at the request of the company. When it comes to qualification of auditor, a person who is a chartered accountant within the meaning of Chartered Accountants Act 1949, and he has to hold certificate under Restriction Auditor Certificate Rules 1956 to get qualified as an auditor of the company. And an auditor can be working in capacity as an individual, a partnership firm, and a limited liability partnership. When it comes to disqualification of company auditor, it is prescribed under section 141 subsection 3 of the Companies Act 2013, and these different individuals are not eligible to become the auditor. They are a body corporate. A company cannot become, a body corporate cannot become the auditor. An officer or an employee of the company, which means already existing officer of the company or the employee of the company cannot become the member of cannot become the auditor. A person who is a partner in the business, again a person who has given any sort of guarantee, and those who have got business relationship in the organization, those who have invested in the organization cannot become the auditor. And those who have been committed fraud, those who are questionable in the law they cannot be considered as auditor, and those key managerial persons who hold positions in the board of directors or in the strategic level, or those who are providing any sort of consultancy services or any specialized services like legal services, they cannot be eligible or they cannot be qualified as auditor. And if they have any restriction on the maximum number of companies, then again they are not eligible to become the auditor. Right to access to the books of accounts, then right to sign audit reports. So according to section 145, the person who's been appointed as the auditor has the right to sign auditor's report, and he has got that right, and it is being considered as authenticated record for the final judgment. Then auditor in general meeting, according to section 146 of the above act, he should send, the company must send all the notices and communication to the auditor. If it is any matter relating to general meeting, every information has to be sent through a proper formal communication channel to the auditor, and everything has to be recorded. And right to remuneration. So on the completion of the work by the auditor, he has got the right to get salary, he has got the right to get a remuneration, and he cannot have any limitation with regards to that remuneration, and it is fixed in the annual general meeting. Power to inspect branch accounts. So whenever as per the section 143 subsection 8, where any accounts of the branch or any other subsidiary, the auditor can have the right to go and inspect the branch and have access to the branch accounts. Then powers of CAG in case of government company. This is prescribed from section 143 subsection 5 to section 143 subsection 7. So if in case it's a government company, the audit report among other things shall include the directions, if any, issued by the CAG, the action taken and the impact thereof on the company's accounts and financial statement. The CAG will have the right to conduct a supplementary audit of financial statement of the company and comment upon or supplement such audit report within 60 days from the date of receipt of the audit report. Within 60 days from the date of receipt of audit report under section 143 subsection 5. So, and the CAG by any order can have test audit to be conducted to the books or accounts of the company, and this is covered under section 139 subsection 5 to 139 subsection 7. So this is with regards to the rights of the company. When it comes to the duties of the auditor, duties are prescribed under section 143 of the Companies Act, whereas under the duties, the first duty is making the report. So the auditor has the duty as a duty based on his professional qualification and the expertise that he holds. His major duty is to prepare the report, and the report should have enough information and explanations, and it should have a proper recording of all the facts and figures. Along with that, they should also include every possible information of the company and its branch accounts, and in this process they have to verify all the financial statements whether it is complying with the accounting standards or not. They have to make the inquiry about it, and they also have to look into the observations of the accounting department in the preparation of books of accounts. And if they have any whether if at all, if any director is disqualified, whether they have been appointed as per the legal requirement, that they have to ensure. And they should also make sure that they have adequate internal control system in place to have control over all the possible transactions. And when it comes to auditing standards is prescribed as per section 143 subsection 9 and 10, and they have to make sure that every accounting information is being done as per the auditing standards, and every auditor must and should comply with auditing standards, and you should take recommendations from ICAI, that is Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and National Financial Reporting Authority in this process. Then fraud reporting, this is done as per section 143 subsection 12 and subsection 15 and rule 13. So if an auditor of a company, so if in case in the course of performance of his duties as auditor has a reason to believe that an offense involving fraud is being committed in the company by the officers or employees, he can immediately report that with the central government, and he has to report it in a prescribed format only, and he should make sure that he is going to follow the legal rules, and the central government will immediately, but not later than 60 years, he is going to the central government is going to take the decision. So auditor shall forward in this direction, the auditor shall forward the report to the board or the audit committee, and if he has got any knowledge of the fraud or seeking their reply or observations within 45 days. On receipt of such reply or observations, the auditor shall forward this report and reply or the observations of the board or audit committee along with his comments to the central government within 15 days of receipt of such reply. So he has to do the next step within 15 days. And in case the auditor fails to get any reply from the board within the stipulated time of 45 days, then he can go forward and report that to the central government along with a note containing the details of his report that was earlier forwarded to the board or the audit committee, and if he fails to receive any reply or observation within the stipulated time period. When it comes to winding up, it is as per section 305. At the time of voluntary winding up of a company, it is mandatory requirement that auditor should attach the copy of audits of the company prepared by him. So while winding up, audit reports are must and should. Other duties, so besides that, the auditor should give all possible assistance to the inspectors in case of an investigation of the affairs of the company, and suppose if in case an existing company issues prospectus, it should contain a statement of profit and loss for the last 5 years showing the rate of dividends paid to each class of the shares. So in such situation, it's the duty of the auditor to provide and certify all these statements. When it comes to professional ethics of the auditor, of course, integrity, he has to maintain that, integrity, and he should provide the appropriate information. Objectivity, he cannot provide, the decision based on the emotions. He has to provide the decisions based on the existing facts and figures. Just because the auditor is friend of the client doesn't mean he has to provide a biased judgment, right? So objectivity is nothing but providing the decision based on the facts and figures. Confidentiality, whatever the observations that he is going to do in the auditing process has to be kept confidential. He cannot reveal it to every third party. Competency, when it comes to professional competency, they have to have a proper aptitude and calculations and quantitative ability to perform the auditing work, as he has to deal with the multiple books of accounts and books of the company. Independence, he should take independent decision. He cannot rely on someone else's opinion to provide his opinion. His opinion has to be from his own decision making capability. Technical standards, so he should know all the accounting standards, auditing standards. Suppose if he is going for valuation or verification, he should know that there are certain quality control systems, so he should take the experts advice in this, and then he has to be technically strong in whatever the field that he is going to perform. Liability of auditors under Companies Act 2013. So when it comes to liability of the auditor, he has got certain liabilities. Penalty for non-compliance, this is as per section 139, 143, 144 and 145 of the act, and the auditor shall be punishable with fine which shall not be less than 25,000, but it can be extended up to 5 lakh rupees as well. Suppose if the auditor has done any mistake knowingly or willfully with the intention to deceive the company, then he will be having an imprisonment for the term of 1 year, or he can also have the fine which will be ranging from 1 lakh to 25 lakh rupees. And suppose if the auditor is convicted under any of these sections, then he will be liable to refund the remuneration that he has received from the company, and he should also pay the damages. He should compensate for the damages that he has done for the company. Then penalty for failure to disclose fraud. So this is prescribed as per section 143 subsection 12. So it's the duty of an auditor to have a proper performance and standards, and if he has a reason to believe that an offense involving fraud is being done right against the company, and the employees of the company they can immediately report the matter to the central government. Suppose if the employee observes any such fraudulent activity done by the auditor, the employee can immediately report that to the central government. In case of any failure on his part to comply with this duty, he will be punishable with the fine, and it would be ranging from 1 lakh to 25 lakh rupees. Then again, penalty for professional misconduct under National Financial Review Authority. National Financial Review Authority. So he will have the shall have, that is NFRA will have a power, that is to have exercise the power. And suppose if the professional misconduct is being done by the auditor, then they can impose penalty, and it would be more than 1 lakh rupees, and or it can also be 5 times the fees that he has received, or it can be up to 10 lakh rupees or 10 times the fees that he has received. And action in case of fraud by auditors. So suppose without prejudice to any action under the provisions of this act or any other law for the time being in force, the National Company Law Tribunal, or an application made to it by the central government or by any person concerned, the company or its directors or officers, it may by order direct the company to change its auditor. So the auditor, whether individual or firm against whom final order has been passed by the tribunal under this section, shall not be eligible to be appointed as auditor of the company for a period of 5 years from the date of passing of the order, and the auditor shall also be liable for action under section 447. Action under section 447 is nothing but without prejudice to any liability, including repayment of any debt under this act or any other law for this time being in force, any person who is found to be guilty of fraud shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 6 months, but which may extend to 10 years, and shall also be liable to fine which shall not be less than the amount involved in fraud, but which may extend to 3 times the amount involved in the fraud. Liability of firm, where in case of audit of a company being conducted by an audit firm, it is proved that the partner or partners of the audit firm has or have acted in a fraudulent manner or abetted or colluded in any fraud by or in relation to or by the company or its directors or officers, the liability, whether civil or criminal as provided in this act or in any other law for the time being in force for such act, shall be of the partner or partners concerned of the audit firm and of the audit firm jointly and severally. Class action suits. So any 100 or more members or deposit holders of the company, or 10% of the total number of members or deposit holders of the company, can file a class action suit to claim damages or compensation, or demand any other suitable action against the auditor in the manner prescribed under section 245 of the Act. The action under this section can be initiated against the auditor, including audit firm of the company, for any improper or misleading statement or particulars made in the audit report, or for any fraudulent, unlawful or wrongful act of the conduct. Right? Criminal liability of auditor. These are the sections that prescribes the criminal liability of the auditor. Misstatement in prospectus, section 34. Likewise, they have similar liabilities for the auditor. Audit of educational institutions. Educational institutions. So with this, we have we have gone through the detailed legal aspects of the auditor, the meaning of the auditor, the appointment, qualification, disqualification, retirement, remuneration, then rights, duties, liabilities. Now the next part of this chapter are audit of education institution, audit of insurance companies, and audit of cooperative societies. So now we are dealing with audit of educational institution. Educational institutions include schools, colleges, and universities, and these three are considered as educational institution, and there is no legal compulsion that these institutions have to go for auditing, but keeping in the mind of its utility, right, because education is very important, keeping that particular note, the Directorate of Education and Universities have asked their institutions to get their accounts audited. Auditor should examine some important points in this regard. So that is, they study the rules and regulations of the particular university that they go for auditing for, and they check minutes book of the managing committee, and they also check all the sources of income as well as what are the various form of expenditures that they have incurred, and the receipts of the assets and investments. Audit of income of the educational institutions. So what are the different sources of income and what are the different books of accounts that they have to audit? That is income from fees, they get income from grant in aid, they also get income from donations and subscriptions, they get income from endowment. Endowment is nothing but certain policies like life insurance. They also get income from investments, and if they are providing for some other training purposes, that training institute will provide rent for the education institution. So they also provide their space for other activities for which they get rental income. Audit of expenses of educational institution. Again, when it comes to expenses, they have to provide salaries. So when they are providing salaries, the pay slips that they provide for their staff members, and whether it has been done as per the proper income tax rules, whether the professional tax have been applicable, whether they are paying the taxes on time, all the records have to be kept by the education institution. Establishment expenses are nothing but whenever they start new branches or when they go for expansion, or as such they incur certain expenses, so they are considered as establishment expenses. Payment of scholarships, of course they pay scholarships to the students and various stakeholders of the society. Contribution to staff provident fund, of course they provide social security benefits to their staff members, so that can be termed as provident fund. And capital expenditure, they also incur expenditure in the form of getting the infrastructural facilities for the educational institutions in the name of computers, in the name of libraries, in the name of desks, in the name of boards. So these are included under capital expenditure. Audit of insurance company. So the insurance companies are basically governed under Insurance Act 1938. Life insurance business was nationalized in the year 1956 by passing Life Insurance Corporation Act. Section 12 of Insurance Act 1938 requires that every insurance company must and should be audited annually. by having an auditor appointed under the provisions of Companies Act 1986. The duties of an auditor in the audit of insurance companies is they have to abide by IRDA Act, because that is the regulatory authority that is going to be the watchdog of insurance business in India, Insurance and Regulatory Development Authority. He should also make sure that the annual accounts have been properly maintained as per the legal provisions, and they have followed the code of conduct in doing the business, and they have followed ethical way of dealing with the business, and all the receipts and documentary evidences have been kept in a proper manner. And if they have any sort of investments or dividends or interest or any such information have to be made in a proper order. So these are the different items that they go for verification, where in with regards to insurance company. One is premium. Premium is the fee that they collect from the insurance policy holders. Claims, the amount that they provide as the final amount to the policy holders. Expenses of the management, agents balances, cash and bank balances, investments, reinsurance. At times the insurance policy would be again subjected to insurance, so that is called as reinsurance. Amount due from other insurers, borrowings, management report, certificate of solvency margin. So these are the different documents that they verify in the process of audit of insurance companies. Next, audit of cooperative society. You people know that cooperative society is done mainly for socio-economic upliftment of their members. It is not for commercial purpose. So cooperative societies are established under Cooperative Societies Act 1912, and they should have all the cooperative societies are established under this particular act. They go for auditing, and they should have knowledge, expert knowledge about how, if the auditor is appointed, he should have expert knowledge as how the cooperative society is going to work. And he should also study the bylaws of the society and make sure that amendments are done on a time to time basis with the help of bylaws, and it is duly registered with the registrar of the cooperative society. Right of an auditor is prescribed under section 17. So he can access to all the books of accounts, papers and securities of the society, and he should also check the balance sheet and whether the true and fair picture has been depicted in the balance sheet or not, whether the state of the business is being done in in coordination with the interest of the members of the cooperative society or not. So these things have to be kept in the mind, and he has the right to ask every information from every officer of the society, and he can know the right of, he has the right to know about all the transactions of the society. When it comes to the duties of an auditor, the auditor should acquaint himself, and he should know all the bylaws. He should thoroughly check the membership, and he should also have his duty is to know whether all the deposits, borrowings, investments, receipt books, cash books, other books of accounts have been kept in the most prescribed manner as per the standard. And he should also physically verify the assets and liabilities of the company, and he should also examine other current assets and liabilities of the company, and he should see that the reserve fund is given priority of 25% and welfare fund gets only 10% after that. So he should see whether they have given importance for reserve fund or not, and he will also make sure that the cash book or the cash transactions have been done with the utmost transparency manner. So this is how the fifth chapter goes about. So make sure that you are quite aware about the legalities of an auditor, then audit of education institution, audit of insurance company, and audit of cooperative society. So from this chapter you can expect section B question as well as section C question. So it's a very important chapter from examination point of view. Please go through this PowerPoint presentation. It would be of great help for you during your examination preparation. Thank you. All the best for your exams and all the best for your future endeavors.